So I want you to picture a scenario in your head for just a quick second here. Let's say that a few months ago, you went on an app store and you found an app that was fitting some need. And so you bought the app and you use it for the next few months and you really enjoy it. And then one day, out of the blue, you get an update that says that the app is moving from a one-time payment to a subscription model. All of a sudden, all the features that you paid for are locked behind a monthly or yearly payment. That's frustrating. And maybe you've had this experience at some point in your life. Maybe you ended up paying for an app and then all of a sudden you're kind of left holding the bag with a maybe $10 to $20 a year subscription. And this is something that upsets a lot of people about the modern subscription model, because it feels like that instead of owning an app, you're instead renting it. You don't actually get to keep the things that you pay for. But in spite of all that, I think that an argument can be made for subscriptions, not necessarily the way that they're implemented right now, but I do think that they can be implemented in a way where both sides get to benefit. And so for this video, I kind of just want to address the whole subscription situation and break down why people have to rely on subscriptions, why people who purchase these apps end up hating subscriptions, and then I want to finish it off with how can we implement subscriptions to where developers can benefit from it and users can still feel like that they're getting their money's worth out of what they pay for apps. So let's get into it. So why exactly are developers moving toward this whole subscription model instead of just charging the same one-time purchases that they used to? For starters, one-time payments, just relying on that for one app, aren't really sustainable. I mean, let's take content creators like myself, for example. Like every day or week or month, we end up posting new content on a regular basis because that's what keeps the steady and continuous growth of whatever platforms that we're posting on. The thing is, for creators like myself, that's a bit more sustainable because it takes less effort to create each individual video or other piece of content that people make. When it comes to apps, on the other hand, that's a whole different situation. You have to have developers and coders, you have to have code to build, and you have to test it, you have to conceptualize, and all these other different steps of the process. And to be able to do that every single week or every single day just is not sustainable. And just like content creation, there's going to come a point for each individual piece of content where eventually the amount of money that you earn from it is just going to start leveling off because people aren't watching them anymore. Similar for apps, there's going to come a point where fewer and fewer people are going to buy them because more people are just going to own them. They kind of have to start making money off of the apps that they've already made. Hence subscriptions, because people can just end up paying on a certain basis to use certain features. And the thing is, companies like Apple actually incentivize this through their app stores nowadays. As it is right now, app store fees are about 30% for an in-app purchase or the purchase of an app. But when it comes to subscriptions, it's 30% for the first year that users pay, and then 15% for every year after, because to use these app stores, developers have to pay platform fees for every app or purchase made on the platform. I mean, not only do developers end up getting this extra revenue from people who are continuously paying, but that also means that big tech companies like Apple also earn continuous fees from those payments being made to the developers. But just because that is helpful to developers, that doesn't mean it's been very well received with the people who use their apps. From what I've seen, there seem to be three main aspects to why people just end up hating subscriptions. Like I mentioned earlier, whenever developers use a subscription model, it ends up making users feel like that they're not really owning the app. It feels more like they're renting it. They're paying to use it over time, and we've become so accustomed to purchasing apps and owning them ourselves that whenever it feels like that we're renting instead, we kind of feel like we don't really have ownership of our copy of it. This goes just beyond starting with a one-time fee and then moving to a subscription model. There are other aspects to this as well. I've seen a number of times whenever developers switch to a subscription model and then a lot of users end up leaving negative reviews saying that they were never alerted in this in advance. They just woke up one day, looked at their app updates, and all of a sudden their app is updated to a subscription model without anyone even warning them. And even if users do get the features that they paid for in the first place, I've even seen other instances where users complain that the other features that are locked behind a subscription usually end up being marked. And basically that just ends up creating this sort of constant reminder that you're not paying them monthly or yearly, even though they technically gave you what you originally paid for. And things like this just kind of come across as a bit greedy on the part of the developer. And then finally, not everyone can just afford a whole bunch of subscriptions. One of the reasons why being able to buy apps is so appealing is that we can buy them, use them, and not worry about having to pay for them consistently. But the thing is, if we have to pay subscriptions for 3, 5, 10 apps, all of that ends up adding up, especially since a lot of apps usually charge as much as like 10, 12 at the minimum per year, and then this usually ends up going like 10, 20, 40, and even twice as much for the family bundles if you want to give your other family members copies of the app. Because the thing is, a lot of these subscriptions are only single licenses. You can't just buy one subscription and then family share it all the time. You usually have to get a more expensive bundle for that. But even with how poorly they're being implemented nowadays, I think that there are some potential solutions that if developers started integrating them, I think subscriptions could be a lot more appealing to people while still giving them the support that they need to keep the apps running. So first and foremost, if you're an app developer who's thinking about switching from a one-time payment to a subscription, give people what they paid for. Or at the very least, separate your subscription from one app to a completely separate one. Keep the original app for the people who originally paid, and then have all of the new features in a rebuilt version of the app if that's viable. But if you're a developer who's planning to make a subscription-based app, then there are a few ways that I think you could go about doing a subscription to make it more successful and make it more appealing to users. First and foremost would be to offer a lifetime subscription option. Not too long ago, one of my favorite note-taking apps, GoodNotes, ended up switching to a subscription model, and from what I could tell, they didn't actually offer a lifetime subscription up until recently, at least to my understanding. And I believe this was in response to a lot of the criticism that came about because of the move to the subscription. The thing is, offering a lifetime subscription option such as this kind of gives users the feeling that they're able to buy the app once and use it just like they were before. Even if lifetime subscriptions do tend to be more expensive than just one-time payments used to be, it at least gives them that feeling of ownership and they don't have to continually pay for it like they otherwise would have to with a subscription. A second option that I've seen done before is to make the app paid, but also offer a supporter tier through a subscription. Case in point, an app called GoodTask. What I've seen them do is that they have two options for people to buy the paid version of the app. One way would be to pay $10 up front for all the features that it offers. And the other option is a supporter option where users can pay $10 a year instead of just a one-time payment. You get all the same features that you would otherwise get with the one-time payment, but you're giving people the option to support you if they want to. And I understand that's probably not exactly a viable solution for all people, but there are other similar ways that you could end up going about this. Let's take, for example, a strategy that I've seen in a lot of more professional apps, and that is paid upgrades. So what I've seen a lot of apps do is basically, instead of charging an actual upright subscription, what they'll do instead is they'll charge a one-time payment for one version of an application. And a lot of times this is actually done with a subscription along the side. Let's take an app, for example, like Parallels, which is an app for Mac that lets users run virtual machines. You can pay for a one-time license, but with something like Parallels, you can actually offer a subscription alongside that to supplement your paid upgrades. So not only are you allowing people to upgrade at their own will and save a little money in the process, but you're also offering that same subscription alongside that to have that recurring revenue for people who want to keep the app up to date. And a similar option that I've seen in some applications is the ability to have a subscription, but once users stop paying, they keep all the features that they've paid up until that point. There's an app on Mac called Agenda, which is basically kind of like a note-taking app, but the big difference with its subscription model is that you pay for the app, and then once you decide you stop paying, you end up keeping all those features that you paid for up until that point. And then if you ever decided that you wanted more upgrades in the future, you just start paying again, and you get all the features up until the last time that you stop paying. It's kind of a nice midpoint between paying upfront for everything in a one-time purchase and offering a subscription, because you're going with the best of both worlds. You're given the option to pay every so often and keep that recurring revenue, while also giving users ownership of the features that they originally paid for. But there also comes the issue with things like services. Let's say things like music streaming services like Apple Music and Spotify, and video on demand services and things like that. I think in those scenarios, the current subscription method can, in a sense, be justified. The thing is, apps like this do have ongoing costs for things like servers and streaming and all that sort of thing. And I think that in instances like this, you can sort of justify the ability to just continue paying over and over again, especially since you do have the option technically outside of those platforms to purchase individual music tracks or movies or TV shows or whatever individually. But the overall point of this is just to be fair to both sides. I understand that developers need to receive that recurring revenue if they want to keep apps going and keep their business sustainable. But at the same time, users also want to be able to keep the things that they originally paid for and not feel like that they have to keep paying over time and rent the software that they would otherwise get to own with something that offers a one-time purchase like apps used to. But anyway, thanks for watching this video. Feel free to watch this video next. Also subscribe to become a Jenny. That's what I call my fans. And I'll see you guys next week. Adios.